Middleton, Parker.
I joined the Metropolitan Police Department in October of 1986. It's every officer's desire to become a detective, the top tier. A homicide detective gets to investigate the most heinous crime there is. You get to hunt the beast.
Jackie Middleton is a great detective, and Jackie was great because of her rapport with people. She can calm people. She was passionate. She knew how to turn a switch off and on when it was needed, and she could be tough.
At the time, I had transferred from homicide and was working in the 7th District.
Middleton.
Jackie Middleton is a well-experienced missing persons investigator and a well-experienced homicide detective. She's summoned to the front lobby of the precinct building to meet Letitia's mother and her sister and the father.
Just don't give me somebody to get help with the paperwork first.
I'm doing it.
We're doing it. Yeah, I understand.
Hey,
we got you.
Hey.
So I spoke with the family, and they were complaining about Letitia being missing.
They are more than alarmed. They need help to find their loved one. And the most obvious place to look for the help is the police department.
Y'all come with me. Y'all come on to the back. I'll help you find your daughter. Y'all come on. Come on back.
And that was the beginning of the relationship between the Campbell Frasers and myself.
So we sat down and Jackie talked to us. She kind of calmed us down and, made us feel comfortable about them looking into our daughter's case.
First question we always ask is, has she ever ran away?
We said no, she never ran away because that's not Tisha, Tisha always came home when she got off work and did what she had to do for Diamond and everything.
Who's Diamond?
Tisha's daughter.
I'ma get you.
Letitia left behind a daughter, Diamond, who was 3 at the time.
Oh, damn it. Her and her mother was like a team. The only time she wasn't with her mother is when her mother was at work or school. But outside of that, they was together all the time, hooked to her hip.
When you're the mother of a small child, you come home to care for that child. If she's not home, it's because she can't come home. Nobody leaves a child behind. Nobody.
No, something's definitely happened.
Okay, listen, guys, we'll find her.
The concern is that she's not missing, but she's been harmed in some way.
I treated this case as if it was a murder from the very beginning.
Thank you.
We've got to proceed quickly to find out where this girl is. The longer she's missing, the more danger she's in.
And so, first thing that I thought we needed to do was speak to the last person who saw her.
So Middleton goes to the McDonald's, speaks to the manager.
We wanted to find out if she had any problems with anyone on the job. Were there any customers she was having issues with?
Letitia? She's one of my best employees.
They all like Letitia. They admire her for her willingness to advance herself.
She worked hard. Once she graduated high school, she wound up working for McDonald's, and also she was getting her culinary arts degree. She loved cooking, so I know being a chef was one of her things that she wanted to do eventually.
Did Letitia have any problems here last night?
Nothing I can think of.
Nothing that's out of the ordinary. One coworker sees her leave to go to the bus as is usual.
So we received information that she got on the P bus, which is the bus that she rode home all the time.
Detective Middleton, Metro PD.
So Middleton identifies the driver on duty that night.
Yeah, I just wonder, have you seen this girl?
Yeah, she rides the bus all the time.
Do you remember seeing her last night?
The bus driver says that she was with a man. Now, that's interesting. So who was this man? Middleton goes back to the family with the description provided by the bus driver, and the mother immediately says, oh, that's her boyfriend, Rynell Mills, and that he rides the bus with her sometimes.
They will always be together. They kind of like grew up together.
Something goes wrong between people that are romantically involved. It can be a very emotional and thus a very dangerous thing.
Historically, when you have cases like this, it's the boyfriend or the husband.
That's the first person you're going to look at. Probably 9.5 times out of 10, it is that person.
So Middleton finds her boyfriend. He's also very concerned because this is out of character for Letitia to not make contact.
I need you to tell me about the meetup with Letitia on the bus.
After work, she normally get on the bus with me, ride the bus every day.
Apparently, he had met her coming from work. She said she was going to meet some friends. She got off in the area of 22nd Street, and he continued to go home.
It is her custom to call him every night to say that she got home safely. But that night of August 2nd, she never called.
Are you willing to take a polygraph test?
Yes.
I am not the person that did the polygraph. The polygrapher views the case and they ask questions about, when's the last time they saw them? Do you know what happened? Did you cause the disappearance? Things of those nature. There was no deception. There was nothing that raised the radar that this is our guy. We did verify this story, so things were lining up.
Can you think of anybody who may know where Letitia is?
Did you talk to Marcus?
Who's Marcus?
Diamond's daddy.
He is the biological father of Diamond. He thus becomes a suspect.
Even if the father is not dating her at the time, there's going to be disputes because the child is involved. So as a detective, you most definitely want to first start there.
So Marcus, what have you been doing? Let's go ask him. Middleton's interview with Letitia's boyfriend yields the identity of someone else, the father of Letitia's child, Diamond. So Middleton needs to find Marcus and see what explanation he has for the disappearance of Letitia Frazier.
We went to his house and he was interviewed.
Marcus, so what was your relationship with Letitia like?
It was fine.
They were trying to co-parent. They're children. They had this baby when they were like 15 and 16 years old, so they're doing the best they can.
Were y'all having any problems over Diamond or anything like that?
Nah, everything was cool.
He's very cooperative and willing to submit to any testing whatsoever.
We were able to get him to take a polygraph.
And he passed that with flying colors.
We talked to a lot of people. We couldn't find anybody to say that it was volatile or there was any issues or that he would have done anything to her.
So Middleton has no reason to believe that he has anything to do with her disappearance. Good for him.
So after we ruled out the obvious, we started looking to people that she trusted. Her boyfriend said she got off the bus, communicated that she was going to stop and see some friends. So naturally, we want to talk to these kids that she was supposed to be going to see.
Middleton has determined a group of friends exist. They listen to music, they play video games, they all like Letitia, they're all friendly with her. They are Brian Gaither, Johnny Sweet, and Lainey Bell.
Did you guys see Letitia the night she disappeared?
No, she never showed up.
And of course, nobody didn't see her. She never made it to the apartment.
So, Letitia, was she having any problems with anybody?
No, Tisha was cool with everybody.
She was never involved in like craziness. She loved to have fun, always kept a smile on her face. Like even at a moment where she might be hurting, she's still smiling.
Everybody said that Letitia Frazier lit up a room.
She just smiled all the time, and you know, she was really friendly to people, and they gravitated to that.
Tisha had her stuff together, man.
So makes sense.
Everybody painted her to be a very genuine, nice, caring, responsible young lady.
All Middleton has learned is how concerned everyone is, but nobody really has any knowledge. Letitia has vanished, and no one seems to know how that might have happened. In a case like this, what makes it even more difficult? You have a 4-year-old child who wants to know where her mother is, and you can't tell her. You'd love to be able to, but you cannot.
There's a lot of emotional things start going on within her. You want to help, but you really can't. But she's missing that void. I know that took a toll on her.
The longer it takes to find her, the less likely it becomes that she will be found unharmed. Someone has done something awful to Letitia Frazier.
So as we started interviewing people in the neighborhood.
Cameras in the neighborhood is very important.
Hey guys,
Because you never know who may have seen something.
just want to know if you've seen this girl.
In a neighborhood like the 7th Ward, the code of silence is a problem. Never tell the police anything.
The 7th District is probably the roughest area of DC. It's where your most violent calls come from. Majority of your shootings, majority of your homicides.
There's always been a lot of violence in that particular community, and people don't talk to the police.
There is a concern of being retaliated against for cooperating with law enforcement.
You don't want to get involved with the police. You don't want to bring any light to yourself, so you just say you don't know.
So we started posting flyers in the area that she kind of frequently hung around.
We stood out on the streets passing flyers to people in their cars, people walking the street.
We was all over. We were just throwing them around, putting them up everywhere.
Flyers would tear off phone numbers to Crime Stoppers. Anonymous reporting of information. You can even get a reward, and no one's going to ask your name.
But very shortly after we started putting them up, people would snatch them down.
Every day we would post flyers and we'll come back the next day, they all be gone. It didn't make sense to me.
Why would you pull down flyers of a missing person? Somebody's trying to find her. She has family, she has siblings, she has a mother, she has a father, she has a child.
So it was like, okay, what's up with this? Who is it that doesn't want us to figure this out?
So Carolyn, Letitia's mother, makes the decision it's time to get the press involved in this.
About a week or two after she went missing, that's when Sam Ford came in the picture.
Letitia Frazier disappeared in August. DC Bureau Chief Sam Ford is live in Southeast Washington with that story. Sam.
Well, Gordon, we are on 18th and Trenton Place in Southeast Washington, where 18-year-old Letitia Monique Frazier disappeared.
Sam Ford, take one. I'm Sam Ford. I'm the principal reporter for Stories in Washington, D.C. The family would call saying that this young girl had disappeared, so I thought, this is interesting, let's go.
Sam Ford had came through and he was actually doing a news clip on us. And I mean, he's a really good guy.
Caroline Frazier, the missing woman's mother, was back at 7th Police District headquarters again today, joined by a host of family members and friends who desperately want to know where Letitia Frazier is.
I mean, I've been out there every day, like I said.
Caroline's going to prowl these streets with Sam Ford and a camera and see what they can learn that Middleton would never have access to because of the code of silence involving the police.
It was a lot of doors we knocked on and asked them, did they see Tisha out here and all that.
We got to know these people. We saw how serious they were. We felt for them, you know? They had the love for their child, and they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing.
While they continued to stay in the streets, we were trying to fish it out, trying to figure out who it was, but we just couldn't break anybody.
You know, we kept covering this story. And at one point, somebody started doing like ugly stuff on Facebook.
Not only do we have people tearing down the posters, now her sister LaToya is receiving threats via social media. They are awful threats.
Somebody made the Facebook page. It said Monique Frazier using her middle and last name when they started in with the threats until I had like a whole book of threats.
January 13th, 10:15 p.m. Your sister is dead and gone. I am watching you. One dead, more to go.
They was nasty. They called us everything in the book.
I'm gonna be honest, like I was terrified. Some of those messages was like horrific.
Her black has been gone. Keep the flyers out of the hood. We took them down.
The threat indicates that Letitia Frazier is already dead. It's clear to Middleton this is not a missing person, this is a homicide.
We were blown away. There's somebody who is saying that they know that she's deceased. So of course we want to interview that person. How do you know? What's your involvement?
So Middleton uses the IT services of the police department to recover the IP address of where these threats originated. They find the location where this IP is addressed.
We gear up, we go out to this address.
If their suspicions are correct, they may be finding a murderer there.
You've got to be kidding me.
We get there, it's a vacant lot. There's no house there where this address should have been.
They find nothing.
It's like somebody used an address that did not exist.
This is the curse of the internet. It gives everyone anonymity, the most dangerous of all things. Step out here in the sunlight, tell me your name and your mother's name, and then repeat what you were going to say a minute ago, and people won't do it.
And then after that, we continue to pass out flyers, try to interview people, but we came up with nothing.
This investigation has gone on for almost 6 months. There is hardly any hope that Letitia Frazier is alive and well.
I think after those months of passing out flyers, my mind at that point just went to mush because it's like I knew something had to happen.
All I could do is just close my eyes and really pray, because I couldn't do nothing else.
No one gets to play God. The family deserves to know what happened to their daughter. Every family does.
You had this wonderful person missing and nobody saying anything. You have to put your boots to the ground, as I say, lever to the pavement. Talk to people. Eventually, you're gonna reach the heart of someone. Someone's heartstrings will be pulled. And they will tell you what you need to know.
In January of 2011, Caroline Frazier was still on local news, passing out missing person flyers for Letitia Frazier.
Middleton.
On every flyer, we put out call crime solvers with your tip.
Okay, hold on. What did they say exactly?
So someone called in and gave a tip.
They say they know what happened to Letitia Frazier, and further, they know who's responsible for it.
And everything just started falling together from that one call.
I need this girl down here right now.
One thing that is certain about murder cases, the truth finds a way of escaping. Despite Herculean efforts to prevent it, it still finds a way.
Middleton.
Middleton is contacted by an anonymous informant. They say they know what happened to Letitia Frazier.
We were able to track that person down and basically told them that, you know, it was important that you help.
Letitia's family needs to know what happened to their daughter.
They couldn't give, you know, the whole spiel of what happened, but they could give us who was there. And I just couldn't believe who was involved.
I was shocked.
The informant says that Letitia Frazier was murdered by her own friends, Johnny Sweet, Brian Gaither, and Laney Bell. The very same friends who Middleton interviewed and put on a performance of no knowledge of the event.
I was in awe because these people were her friends.
I heard it was some more people there.
The informant said there were 3 other people that were present at the time, so a total of 6 people.
It's not common where you have a murder that is committed by 6 individuals.
What are the odds of that?
Thank you. They had different degrees of culpability, but arrest warrants were obtained for all 6.
You needed a big team of detectives to bring them in, round them up.
When you plan an arrest like this, the first thing is surveillance. You got to put eyes on these people. You can't guess where they are. You have to know.
That them over there?
Mm-hmm. That's our boy.
The arrest teams fan out.
We got eyes on the suspect.
Okay, let's make our move.
Coordinated on a radio, and it's time to hit it. And they apprehend everybody at the same moment.
Hands in the air, Johnny. Get on the ground. Up. Lay down.
Show me your hands! Please, get on the ground! Show me your hands!
Get on the ground now.
Down on the ground! Now! Down on the ground. Get on the ground.
Everyone is marched out in handcuffs, placed in a police car, driven to an interrogation room where they are alone. There's 0 opportunity to discuss what they're going to say with anyone other than the police.
So how you want to do this?
Middleton is taking a calculated risk by rounding these people up. They don't have a provable charge against anybody. They need somebody to run their mouth.
We're just gonna have to talk to them one at a time.
It only has to start with one. You break the surface tension of the glass, and the glass crumbles. The very same thing with humans. Break the surface tension, the lies fold.
All right, Johnny. I'm gonna need you to tell me what you know about what happened to Letitia Frazier.
I got nothing for you, man.
I told you guys I haven't seen her.
I never saw her the night she disappeared.
Many of the individuals at first said they had no idea what they were talking about, and they had this code of silence.
It was amazing that these young people were able to keep it quiet that long, because young people run their mouths all the time. I mean, all the time.
There's an old expression in law enforcement. A secret can be kept between three people if two of them are dead. Secrets don't stay secrets. No one can maintain their silence. People suffer from diarrhea of the mouth. They always have, and they always will.
When you have a group of people involved in a crime together, now it's about playing everyone against each other. So they're not used to the harsh interrogations, the games we play to get confessions.
Well, that's not what he told me over there.
What did he say?
Our job is to get information from the suspects. We're allowed to lie in order to get to the truth. So when I say we play people against each other, so now I can go to one and say, this person's told me this person told me that.
Whatever she's telling you is a lie. That's not how it happened.
Well, then tell me how it did happen.
These were, far and away, the best interrogations that I had ever seen in my career then, and still are some of the best that I've ever seen now.
It was almost like art. It was like a picture being drawn. I mean, it was just fantastic.
Mitch has a great way of talking and communicating with people, and have a great way of getting people to want to talk to him.
That's the one you need to crack right there.
Why you say that?
Because I know her.
I told them that this young lady, oddly enough, was a member of my church at that time.
Anika Nelson was her name.
Jackie was telling us how to use church to our advantage to get her to confess.
She's religious. She has a sense of right and wrong. Pursue that.
Listen, young lady, I don't know how involved you were exactly, but I do know that you were there. So, I know that this is tearing you up inside, but trust me, the truth will set you free.
She can't deal with this anymore. She has to tell them the truth. Okay, you have the floor. What happened?
Tisha came over to Johnny's apartment after she got out of work.
She comes over to say hello to her friends. There's a confrontation that immediately occurs. She is accused of stealing $900 in cash out of Johnny Sweet's apartment. She is then immediately assaulted.
We all started hitting on her, and things just got out of hand.
It started off with the girls assaulting her, and then the guys got involved.
Then they all started hitting her, started kicking her.
It's an absolutely savage attack, something beyond the pale.
She was moaning, so they put a sock in her mouth.
They put duct tape over her mouth. They put a pillowcase over her head. You place it in the closet. You leave her there. I mean, how's she gonna breathe?
What happened to Letitia's body?
I don't know. They got rid of the body somehow.
There's no body, so now we have to prove that person we're talking about is the person that was there.
It's very important to find physical evidence.
We need to find something, like blood, like part of Letitia Frazier. It's critical to the case, absolutely critical. So Middleton takes the CSI crew with her to Johnny Sweet's apartment, and they go over this apartment with a fine-tooth comb.
If you don't clean up properly, there's always going to be evidence left behind.
They sprayed a chemical all throughout the bathroom to be able to see if they could find any traces of organic material.
Hit the lights.
but they couldn't locate any. There was evidence that the defendants had used bleach to clean up, and bleach ordinarily will destroy forensic material. So we thought that our chances of being able to find something was very slim.
What about in here?
Nothing.
The floor, looking at it, has been cleaned thoroughly with something. The difficulty is blood has a tendency to seep. It seeps between floor cracks, between wallboard and the floor.
All right, well, cut up the floor.
It was a big production. I remember that the evidence technicians had to have someone bring a circular saw to literally saw a hole in the floor so that we could try it to use it for forensic testing.
So if there was blood in this closet, they're going to find it?
When you have concrete evidence to say, yes, it was her, she was here, it's almost like the smoking gun.
After 6 months of effort, now we are 2 inches away from putting these people in prison, but we have to get those last 2 inches. We must, or nobody's going to jail. Well, this is a 6-month investigation involving some very unpleasant people who've already lied to the police a number of times, and now one of them confesses.
Anika Nelson, she came forward and told the police what she knew about what had happened that day.
But there has to be evidence in support of your confession, which in this case is traces of Letitia Frazier in that closet. The forensic search is everything to this case.
Heard back from forensics.
Well, I'll be damned.
Middleton is thrilled to discover that the CSI team has recovered human blood from the closet under the floor.
So you need to do a comparison to see if this blood is related to Letitia Frazier. Well, how do you do that if Letitia Frazier isn't here any longer?
So Middleton goes to the apartment where she lived to recover some of her personal things to get a DNA sample from her toothbrush, her hairbrush, or any other device.
We moved, so we had to get rid of that kind of stuff.
There's nothing remaining that belonged to Letitia Frazier that might have some DNA sample on it. But that doesn't mean you're out of luck.
There may be another way.
You can take DNA from a family member to see if there was a match with the DNA recovered.
So they were going to swab us for the DNA.
At the time, in 2010, I had not heard of using the parental links in a no-body case to try to establish the existence of a homicide. This was one of the first times where that happened.
So a cheap swab is taken from the mother, one from the father. When that goes through the laboratory and comes back, it is in fact a match. The blood in the closet is the blood of Letitia Frazier. That is no question.
I already knew that something happened to her, but to get the confirmation that she's actually gone, like my heart could have dropped to my feet. Like my sister's gone. How do you get another little sister? That doesn't happen, you know. So it kind of tore me up a lot.
When Middleton first talks to these 3 people, Bell, Sweet, and Gaither, she knows little or nothing about this case. Now we have a different circumstance.
We had a sense of what happened. Now we had to corroborate that. So the detectives then go to Brian Gaither. He was a little bit of the leader of the group.
I don't know, man. I don't know what happened to that girl.
They all think they're smart. They're going to talk their way out of this. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're talking to an experienced homicide detective, not some guy on a city bus. And they're gonna pick at you until you start to bleed. Then we're gonna see how smart you are.
We know Letitia died inside of Johnny's apartment. And we know that you put her in the closet.
When you hit people with facts, you can't refute the facts.
I believe the more they realized that we had information, that's what helped make them start cracking.
Look, man, she wasn't supposed to die or nothing.
Brian Gaither realizes there's no way out of this for him, and he confesses his involvement and tells the story as to what happened.
Johnny said Tisha owed him $900, so he had to teach her a lesson.
So the plan was for Johnny Sweet to get her over there, and he had some young ladies who was part of their little crew who were going to beat her up.
They invite her over to the apartment, which is not uncommon.
Hey, what's up, y'all? I got some fries if anyone's hungry. Why y'all slamming doors?
And before anything can be said, an assault begins with Letitia Frazier as the focus.
And it just went out of control.
It's like watching a group of jackals attack an animal in the wild. The pack mentality. It's frightening. Humans can be extremely frightening.
What did you do?
I put her in a sleep hold.
Gaither picks her up with his forearm under her chin, where you restrict the airway until the person passes out. He then tapes a sheet over her head and puts her in a closet. They go check on her a little while later and discover that she's dead.
So now they have a dead body in a closet.
Now they're in panic mode. What are we going to do?
We put her in the bathtub.
The bathtub? Why?
Because we were supposed to cut her up.
Johnny Sweet suggests that they dismember her body so it can be disposed of. He attempts to do this with a kitchen knife. Neither of these people understand how difficult that is.
It just becomes a disaster. They can't dismember her, so they put her in a tub, like a storage tub, and place her in a closet.
So now we have to get rid of the body.
We put her body in a dumpster.
The dumpster?
It's just so heartless.
Oh wow, I was shocked that these young people just say, let's just throw her body in the dumpster. That was just coldness.
It was cruel the way they did her. Nobody deserves that, but especially not this young lady.
Now, Middleton is faced with trying to recover her remains.
We learned that the trash from that dumpster led us to a landfill down in Southern Virginia.
Now, it's been in this landfill for over 6 months, which means it's buried under hundreds of feet of garbage. Hundreds of feet. The most dangerous thing about a landfill is it produces methane gas.
The specialist said that, given the dangers, they ultimately would not engage in the landfill excavation.
The Frasers and Campbells did not get the proper burial for their daughter.
That was outrageous. It wasn't fair to none of us.
I don't feel like nobody deserved to have to lay to rest in a trash landfill. Like, that's just...
Bro,
Developing in the district tonight, a guilty plea from the man accused of killing teenager Letitia Frazier.
Prosecutors said they had planned to use ABC7 news clips against 25-year-old Brian Gaither. We shot this video as we followed the victim's family leafleting the neighborhood where she disappeared in August 2010. Gaither put his arm around Frazier's mother, offered to let her search this apartment, where he now confesses he and 5 others attacked Frazier and choked her to death.
We believe that she was in that room when the mom was actually in the unit looking for her.
But I didn't know it, and I didn't smell nothing, so I figured, like, you know, she ain't here.
That's the part that's just sickening to me, truthfully. That's just crazy.
He actually hugged my mom and said, "Mom, you know, if I knew where your daughter was, you know I'd let you know." So for me, I'm just like, what type of people are you?
Of all of the cases that I have seen come through the homicide section, this is one of the most tragic. The trial of Johnny Sweet, he was the only person who actually went to trial. I remember it was particularly difficult because this was the first time that the family heard everything. We had shared a lot of information with them, but they had never seen the whole picture put together for them. And it wasn't until that trial that they had seen everything. And I know that was particularly difficult.
I remember one day I went to court and I was actually walking in the building, and I normally would take the escalators, but today I just decided to get on the elevator. So I got on the elevator and the elevator stopped like a level up, and this guy got on like all these boxes and stuff, and it just like, it smelled like death. And I'll never forget, he got off on the same floor as me and we walked into the same courtroom, and my heart like to drop because I knew that was like what was left and what was last of when my sister was gone.
Johnny Sweet maintained his silence, refused to make a statement. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Mr. Gaither was also sentenced to life in prison. Lainey Bell, she was sentenced to 3 years because she was not physically involved in the event itself.
The rest of the defendants had different degrees of culpability, and Nika Nelsa being the least and Kamal Hassan and Cynthia Proctor being somewhere in the middle. They received between 18 and 52 years, depending on their culpability.
I mean, I was glad that they caught somebody, but they can never serve a sentence enough that I would feel is justice for us losing her life.
I mean, she was a young lady, a kid, pretty much. She's 18 years old, and she was doing the best that she could. And at the end of the day, she lost her life over nothing.
Did $900 even exist? Probably not.
There was absolutely no evidence ever that she had stolen the money. In fact, she was the only one out of all of them who had a job.
I didn't believe that one bit, because I know my daughter. So if she working every day, she don't need to steal from nobody.
So what is the motive for this crime? Rage, anger, jealousy, something was said they didn't like. Who knows?
I really wish that everything happened differently. I wish she was still here. You know, they took her away from so many people. I'm grateful to have my niece. Like, she's so beautiful and they look like twins. Like, she gonna grow up and look just like her mom, so I'm grateful for that.
Miss her being here, miss her smiling. I think about her every day.
We still celebrate her life every year. And, you know, she's not forgotten. You know, she won't be ever. You know.
Detective Middleton was emotional when I spoke with her about this case because you get that way. There are certain cases that just never actually go away. That will always be with her. It's just the way it is. It is the most difficult part of police work.
Phoenix, summer of 1995. The desert heat pressed against the city like a fist, the kind of heat that warped asphalt, melted tar, and carried the stench of dust and gasoline into every corner. In that unforgiving blaze, a 17-year-old girl disappeared. She was last seen leaving a grocery store on West Camelback Road, the sun dropping, the sky bleeding orange. She carried a plastic bag, milk and bread inside, nothing unusual, just another evening in a city where the nights could feel endless. But she never came home. The missing posters came fast, her face stapled to telephone poles, taped across gas stations, printed in the Arizona Republic. Dark hair, bright eyes, a crooked smile that looked like it had been caught mid-laughter. She was a high school senior, part-time waitress, dreamer who wanted to study photography. In the weeks that followed, her name became a wound in every household, the kind of story whispered over morning coffee, retold in hushed tones at gas stations. Did you hear about the girl? Gone, just gone. Detectives hit the ground, tracing her steps. Witnesses said they saw her walking toward the parking lot. Someone said she stopped to talk with a man leaning against a truck, white pickup, dented door, rust creeping along the frame. Another swore she got into the vehicle willingly, as if she knew him. But others contradicted it, saying she walked alone, vanishing around the corner of the lot. No camera caught it, no certainty ever formed. Phoenix PD was left chasing ghosts in 110-degree heat. Search teams combed the desert fringe. Helicopters cutting across the burning sky, officers digging into washes, culverts, dry canals where shadows lingered. Volunteers handed out flyers door to door, churches lit candles, her high school held vigils. The desert swallowed everything. No footprints, no fibers, no trace, just silence. Days bled into weeks. Rumors grew. Some said she ran away chasing a boy to California. Others whispered about trafficking, girls being taken from malls and gas stations, smuggled through I-10 into other states. Parents held their daughters closer. Strangers eyed each other with suspicion. Phoenix was already a city of transients, highways cutting across its heart, strangers coming and going every day. Now it felt like a hunting ground. Detectives found a clue weeks later, a single flip-flop, torn strap lying near a drainage ditch 3 miles from the grocery store. It was her size, her style, but no way to confirm it was hers. No blood, no prints, just rubber worn thin by desert sand. The press latched onto it anyway. Flip-flop may belong to missing teen. The headline burned through Phoenix like a brand, igniting fear. If it was hers, what did it mean? Did she run? Was she dragged? The shoe answered nothing. The family begged for answers on live television. The mother, holding back tears, said her daughter was not a runaway. The father's voice cracked as he swore he would never stop searching. Their words echoed across Arizona, families locking doors, young girls refusing to go out at night. The case became a symbol of everything parents feared, that you could vanish in daylight in front of witnesses and never be seen again. Police dug deeper, interrogating suspects. A local drifter with a record of assaults was hauled in, questioned for hours, released for lack of evidence. A former boyfriend, jealous and volatile, denied involvement, his alibi held. Each suspect raised hope, then collapsed into disappointment. Files thickened, leads thinned, the desert stretched wider. By the end of 1995, the case had already begun to cool. Other crimes demanded attention. Other headlines screamed louder. Phoenix moved forward, but the family was trapped, left with only photographs and silence. The posters faded, curled in the sun, torn away by wind. The girl was swallowed by the city's endless sprawl, her name another ghost drifting across highways. But she was not forgotten. Years passed, detectives retired, evidence boxes gathered dust. Yet every so often her name returned, whispered when another girl went missing, when another body was found in the desert. Each time, the family's phone rang, their hearts stopping, hoping, dreading. Each time, it was never her. And then came the discovery, decades later, that ripped the wound open again. In 2019, during construction on the outskirts of Phoenix, workers unearthed skeletal remains buried shallow in hard-packed earth. Forensic teams rushed in, cordoning off the site, sifting through dirt with trembling hands. Jewelry was found, a thin silver chain, tarnished but intact. Photos confirmed it looked just like the one the missing girl had worn, a gift from her grandmother. DNA testing followed, pulling samples from the brittle bone, running them against the family's profiles. The results were clear. After 24 years, she had been found. The city froze. Headlines blared. Phoenix, 1995, cold case solved, remains identified. The family wept, a storm of grief and relief. They had answers, but no peace. The discovery was not the end. It was the beginning of something darker, because now the question was no longer where she was. It was who had put her there, and why. Detectives opened the case again, dragging boxes from archives, blowing dust off photographs, rereading faded reports. They examined the white pickup that had haunted witness statements. They hunted for men who owned trucks in 1995, tracked down names, records, addresses. One stood out, a mechanic with a history of violence, a man questioned briefly in 1995 but released. His alibi, once considered solid, began to crumble under new scrutiny. Cell towers, non-existent in the 90s, were useless, but DNA was not. A cigarette butt recovered from the burial site decades ago, sealed in evidence, was tested with modern methods. The result was staggering. It matched him. The arrest was swift, the press ferocious. After nearly a quarter century, Phoenix police marched the suspect into custody. Cameras flashed, neighbors gasped, reporters shouted. The headline was thunder, man arrested in 1995, teen cold case. The community erupted. Some cheered justice finally delivered. Others whispered disbelief that he had lived among them all these years, free, invisible. But questions remained. Witnesses long faded, memories eroded. Did he act alone? Was the white pickup sighting real or confusion? Was there a network, as rumors once suggested? The trial loomed like a storm, the family bracing, the city buzzing, the world watching. And in the desert heat, where bones had lain hidden for 24 years, the silence thickened, holding secrets that still refused to speak. The arrest sent Phoenix into shock. A man who had blended into the desert city for decades, walking grocery aisles, fixing engines in a garage on Van Buren Street, nodding to neighbors, had suddenly been unmasked as the prime suspect in the crime that had haunted them for nearly 25 years. Cameras swarmed the courthouse as he was led in chains, his face pale, lips pressed tight, eyes downcast, refusing to meet the fury of a city that felt betrayed. Mothers clutched their daughters tighter that night, fathers double-locked doors. The desert heat seemed heavier, as though the air itself carried accusation. The media descended with a vengeance. Every local station broke from programming to air live coverage. The Arizona Republic printed his mugshot across its front page with a headline in bold, 1995 cold case breakthrough. National outlets picked it up, calling it a testament to science, to persistence, to justice refusing to stay buried. Talk shows filled with analysts dissecting the case, experts explaining how DNA that once meant nothing had now become a sword of truth. But behind the triumphant tone was unease. Witnesses were gone, memories had faded, the trail was dust. Was DNA alone enough to carry the weight of a murder conviction? The prosecution painted him as a predator hiding in plain sight. They said he had lured the girl with familiarity, a mechanic known in the area, offering a ride in the desert heat. They said he had driven her to the outskirts, ended her life, buried her shallow in unforgiving dirt, certain the desert would keep his secret. They pointed to the cigarette butt found near the bones, the match to his DNA, the chain of custody still intact after all these years. They said this was the nail, the proof, the long-awaited answer. The defense struck back hard. They called the evidence contaminated, chain of custody broken, 24 years too long to be trusted. They argued the cigarette butt proved only that he had been near the site, not that he had killed. They hammered on the lack of witnesses, the absence of direct proof, the weakness of memories dragged from 1995. They said the state wanted a conviction to silence outrage, to bury its own failures. They said the man was a scapegoat. The family sat in the courtroom, eyes hollow, bodies trembling, caught between hope and terror. They had waited decades for this. But the cracks in the case scared them. They wanted truth, not just a verdict. They wanted certainty, not just a name. The mother clutched a photograph of her daughter, the same one taped to telephone poles in 1995. She stared at the man in chains as though she could carve the truth from his silence. He never looked back. Witnesses were called. An elderly man, once a night shift worker near the grocery store, testified he saw the white pickup that night, headlights flickering. He swore it matched the suspect's truck. But defense attorneys shredded him, pointing out his fading eyesight, his contradictions in earlier interviews. Another witness, a former co-worker, testified the suspect often followed young women, made crude comments, created unease. Again, the defense snapped back, rumor, hearsay, memory warped by headlines. The trial turned into a theater. Every day another headline, every testimony a spark. Crowds gathered outside, holding candles, holding signs, chanting the girl's name, chanting for justice. Others shouted doubts, waving placards demanding real proof, warning of wrongful conviction. Phoenix was torn down the middle, united in grief, divided in belief. Then came the bombshell. The defense revealed that in 1995, another man, now deceased, had been questioned and quietly released. He too drove a white pickup. He too had a record of violence. The files had been buried, forgotten, only rediscovered by accident. The defense argued this was proof of tunnel vision, of police desperate then and desperate now. They painted a picture of mistakes repeated, of justice stumbling in circles. The prosecution countered with the DNA. Numbers, probabilities, science that does not fade. 99.9% certainty, they said. Not coincidence, not mistake, truth written in cells. The jury shifted, uneasy, caught between the hard edge of science and the fog of doubt. Outside, Phoenix pulsed with anger. The desert city, so often silent, seemed to roar. News crews camped by the courthouse steps, helicopters buzzing overhead. Radio lines lit up with callers, voices raw with fury, fear, and fatigue. Some shouted for execution, others whispered about scapegoats, about cover-ups, about the truth never being allowed to surface. The cold case had not just haunted the family, it had become a mirror of everything the city feared about itself. Inside the prison where he was held during the trial, guards described the suspect as eerily calm. He read books, ate quietly, never lashed out. When asked about the case, he said nothing. Silence became his shield, his weapon, his curse. Some guards swore he muttered in his sleep fragments of sentences. The dirt, the truck, the river. Rumors spread, leaked, exaggerated. The tabloids seized them, printing headlines that screamed killer talks in his sleep. Truth or fiction no longer mattered. The city consumed it all. And then, during cross-examination, the prosecution asked the question that hung like a blade. Why had he left Phoenix in 1996, moving abruptly to another state? His answer was flat: work. The prosecution called it escape. The defense called it coincidence. The jury listened, silent, the weight of decades pressing on their shoulders. As the trial dragged on, the family endured it all. Every gruesome detail, every accusation, every doubt. They lit candles each night, prayed for a verdict that would not betray their daughter's memory. They stood in the courtroom, backs straight, faces carved from grief. And still, the truth was elusive. Was this man guilty? Was he the shadow who had driven her away in the white pickup, or was Phoenix about to bury another mistake under the banner of justice? The trial thundered forward, each day a headline, each night a wound reopened. The desert heat pressed against the city, as though holding its breath, waiting for the final word that would either free it or damn it. The courtroom became a furnace, tension radiating off every bench, every whisper, every glance. Reporters filled the back rows, scribbling, recording, their stories already half-written before witnesses opened their mouths. Jurors sat rigid, faces blank but eyes darting, their silence the loudest thing in the room. Every detail mattered, every pause carried weight, every breath felt amplified under the desert's glare. The prosecution leaned heavily on science. A forensic expert took the stand, his voice steady, explaining how the DNA from the cigarette butt matched the suspect. He spoke of probability, of markers lining up like puzzle pieces, of certainty hovering at 99.9%. The jury leaned forward, the family clutched hands. It was the first time something concrete seemed to pierce the fog. But the defense tore into him with precision. They pointed to chain of custody, the decades in which evidence had sat in boxes, the potential for contamination, the human hands that had touched it. They forced the expert to admit nothing in science was absolute, nothing flawless. The certainty shrank, twisted, became another question mark. Then came the necklace. A detective held it up in a clear plastic bag, the chain found near the remains, tarnished but intact. Photos from 1995 showed the girl wearing it. The jury stared at the image, then at the chain, then back again, the connection obvious. The prosecution said it proved she had been buried there by the man whose DNA matched the cigarette beside her. But the defense countered that the desert was vast. The chain could have been moved, stolen, planted. 24 years left too much room for doubt. Witnesses returned to the stand, dragged from the shadows of memory. A woman, older now, testified she had seen the girl with a man leaning on a white pickup near the store. She squinted at the defendant, said she thought it was him, but time blurred details. The defense pounced. Her statement in 1995 had been uncertain, her description vague. Memory, they argued, was a liar after decades. Another man testified the suspect had bragged once, years later, about knowing where bodies belong. Gasps echoed in the room. The defense shredded him, calling him unreliable, a drunk, a man with grudges. Truth became murky water, impossible to drink. The family sat through it all, silent, broken. The mother's hands shook as she clutched a tissue. The father's jaw clenched so tight it looked ready to snap. They had waited decades for this, but every testimony felt like sand slipping through fingers. Their daughter's voice was the only one missing, and it could never be heard again. Outside, Phoenix boiled. Crowds lined courthouse steps, chanting, holding signs, their anger rising with the heat. Some shouted for justice, for the man to rot. Others chanted about scapegoats, about wrongful conviction, about the state burying the truth. The city was divided, a war fought in headlines and chants. Media coverage turned the trial into spectacle. Documentaries aired nightly, dissecting testimony, replaying every word, every pause. Podcasts devoted hours to theories, debating guilt, innocence, corruption. The case that once lived in silence had become a carnival, and the girl's face was everywhere, staring from screens, frozen forever at 17. And then came the cross-examination that shifted everything. The defense revealed another man, questioned briefly in 1995, who had driven a white pickup and lived near the grocery store. His name had been buried in files, forgotten, overshadowed. He had died years earlier, but records showed he had a history of violence, arrests for assault, whispers of cruelty. Why had police let him go? Why had his trail gone cold while the defendant's life carried on in plain sight? The courtroom trembled with doubt. The prosecution argued it was irrelevant, that DNA didn't lie, but the seed was planted. If another man fit the profile, could this one truly be the killer? The defense pressed further. They brought forward a retired detective, coaxed him into admitting that in 1995 the case was chaotic, resources stretched thin, leads mishandled, files lost, evidence misfiled, witness statements overlooked. The words fell like hammers. The jury shifted uneasily. The family stared at the floor, tears streaking cheeks. Yet the prosecution struck back with venom. They showed records of the suspect leaving Phoenix in 1996, abruptly, with no explanation beyond vague claims of work. They presented testimony from former co-workers who recalled his temper, his obsession with young women, his strange comments. They painted a picture of a predator hiding in plain sight, confident the desert had buried his crime. The trial twisted tighter each day, like a rope pulled to breaking. The jury listened, torn between science and doubt, between memory and decay. The press screamed headlines: cold case on trial, DNA versus memory, Phoenix demands justice. And through it all, the man in chains remained silent. He sat still, hands folded, eyes down, as if he were carved from stone. When the judge asked if he wished to testify, he shook his head once. Silence was his only defense, and it echoed louder than words. The closing arguments loomed, the air thick with heat, with expectation, with dread. The desert sun blazed outside, but inside Phoenix felt frozen, held hostage by a case that refused to end. The city was desperate for an answer, any answer. But answers were fragile, and truth was still buried deep beneath the dust of 1995. Closing arguments began like thunder. The prosecution stood tall, voice sharp, words cutting the silence. They painted the man as a predator who stalked the summer heat of Phoenix in 1995, waiting for an opportunity, a white pickup his hunting ground. They pointed to the cigarette butt, DNA carved into its fibers like a fingerprint from the past. They raised the necklace, the tarnished chain pulled from the desert dirt, proof she had been buried there by someone who knew she would never be found. They called the jury to look at the mother's face, to see 24 years of agony, to feel the weight of silence. They shouted that science does not fade, that probability this high is not coincidence, that justice delayed does not have to mean justice denied. The defense rose with venom, voices deliberate, sentences sharp. They hammered the cracks, evidence boxed for decades, chain of custody weak, memories eroded by time and headlines. They said the cigarette proved only presence, not murder. They reminded the jury of the other man with the white pickup, the one with violence in his history, the one forgotten by investigators. They asked why files had been buried, why evidence mishandled, why the state suddenly found certainty now, when in 1995 it had nothing. They accused the prosecution of scapegoating, of feeding the public a sacrifice to calm the storm. They demanded the jury remember doubt, remember that without a confession, without a body until decades later, without witnesses who could be trusted, guilt was not proven. The courtroom air was suffocating. The family sat frozen, eyes hollow, torn between the need for justice and the fear of being betrayed again. Jurors stared at their laps, at notes scribbled in the margins, at faces they could not forget. The girl's photograph, the defendant's silence. Reporters scribbled frantically, headlines already writing themselves in their minds. Phoenix waited. The jury withdrew. Hours passed. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, pressing against barricades, chanting, shouting, demanding. Some prayed, some cursed. Police stood shoulder to shoulder, riot gear at the ready. The city felt like it balanced on a knife edge. Inside, the jury argued. Science against doubt, DNA against memory, justice against fear of error. Some jurors clung to the certainty of probability. Others clung to the possibility of mistakes. Their voices rose, clashed, softened. They pored over the necklace, the reports, the inconsistencies. They asked themselves if they were convicting a man for murder or for silence. By nightfall, no verdict. By the second day, still none. The city trembled with impatience. Protesters lit candles. Others hurled bottles, rage and grief colliding in the desert heat. The girl's face appeared on screens, on posters, on the lips of strangers. Her name was everywhere, unrelenting. On the third day, the jury filed back into the courtroom. Faces tight, eyes exhausted, steps heavy. The room stilled. Reporters stopped breathing. The foreman stood, his voice cracked but steady enough to cut the silence. Guilty. Gasps tore the chamber. The mother collapsed into arms, sobbing, the father's face a mask of stone. Reporters bolted for the doors, phones raised, headlines exploding. Phoenix, 1995 cold case, guilty verdict. Outside, the crowd erupted, half in cheers, half in rage. Some screamed justice had finally come. Others screamed it was another lie. Police held the lines as chants turned to shoves, as the city burned with emotion. The judge pronounced life in prison. The defendant did not flinch. He stood, chains rattling, eyes blank, lips sealed. He was led away without a word, disappearing behind steel doors, silence his only statement. Phoenix exhaled, but it was not relief, it was something darker, because even with the verdict, even with the sentence, questions clawed at the edges. Where exactly had she died? What had happened in those final hours? Why had evidence been buried, leads ignored? And what about the other man, the one with the white pickup, the one dead, the one whose name now echoed through headlines? The case was closed, but the mystery was not. The city celebrated and doubted at the same time, torn in two, unable to rest. Families of other missing girls stepped forward, asking why their daughters had not been given the same persistence. Conspiracy theories multiplied. Was there more than one man, more than one crime, more than one secret hidden in Phoenix's sprawl? The desert held its silence. The wind swept across highways, through culverts, over dirt lots where bones still might lie. The girl's mural glowed under candlelight, her eyes unblinking, her smile frozen in time. Justice was written into the record, but peace was nowhere to be found. The verdict rippled through Phoenix like a shockwave. Guilty, life in prison, case closed, or so the state declared. But the city did not rest. The courthouse steps remained packed for nights after the sentencing, candles flickering, chants echoing. One side shouted victory, convinced justice had finally clawed its way out of the desert dust. The other side screamed betrayal, convinced an innocent man had been sacrificed to satisfy headlines. The air vibrated with rage, grief, exhaustion. Phoenix was not healed, it was fractured. News anchors filled their screens with his face and hers, side by side, predator and prey, the narrative packaged cleanly for the evening broadcast. Yet beneath the glossy reporting, cracks spread. Podcasts picked apart the trial, dissecting the DNA, the mishandled evidence, the forgotten suspect with the other white pickup. Documentaries streamed worldwide, painting Phoenix as a city haunted by corruption, incompetence, and ghosts. The girl's face, once fading from memory, was now immortal, a symbol etched into the collective psyche of America. The family tried to retreat into silence, but microphones followed. Reporters camped outside their home, desperate for words, for reactions, for grief to be performed on cue. The mother refused, her voice hoarse. She was more than a trial, more than headlines. The father stood rigid beside her, repeating the same phrase again and again. We just wanted her home. But peace was impossible. Every channel, every paper, every stranger reminded them of what had been lost, what could never be recovered. In prison, the man convicted became an enigma. Guards described him as still, detached, a presence that unsettled the blocks. He never argued, never raised his voice, never confessed. He ate his meals, walked his yard time, stared at the floor of his cell. Rumors bloomed. Inmates swore he whispered in the dark, muttering about dirt and headlights. Others claimed he wrote letters no one was allowed to see. A guard leaked a story to the press. One night he carved words into the wall of his cell with a fork, the phrase "she belongs to the desert." Photographs never surfaced, but the tabloids didn't care. The words splashed across front pages, feeding the storm. Phoenix convulsed under the weight of it all. Conspiracy theories bled into daily conversation. Some swore there had been two men, working together, hunting her that night. Others insisted the real killer was dead, the wrong man imprisoned. Shadows grew longer, details twisted into shapes that felt real even when false. Truth and lies fused, inseparable. Meanwhile, detectives quietly reopened old files. Other missing girls, other cases left cold in the 90s. A waitress gone after a late shift in 1997. A college student who vanished walking home in 1999. Their families had never stopped searching, but now their grief gained spotlight. Were the cases connected? Was Phoenix hiding a pattern beneath the sprawl? The idea spread quickly. One girl found, many still missing. Protesters filled downtown, no longer just about the 1995 case, but about every cold case, every failure, every unanswered question. Banners waved, "Who else is out there? Justice for all the missing." Police braced for violence, but the chants were louder than fists. Mothers held photos, fathers held candles, the streets drowned in the weight of loss. The task force, reassembled under political pressure, dug deeper into archives. They found errors, files missing, evidence destroyed, statements never followed. They found fingerprints from 1995 never tested with modern methods, samples that could now be processed. Hopes rose, then shattered. Tests returned inconclusive, degraded, useless after years in dusty boxes. The desert had stolen answers, leaving only fragments. Still, the headlines thundered. Every minor detail became a major story. A truck sighting in 1995 re-examined. A witness, long forgotten, interviewed again. A rumor about trafficking networks through Arizona highways. Each piece added fuel. None brought resolution. Phoenix was trapped in obsession, a city unable to let go. The girl's face became part of the cityscape. Murals stretched across walls, her smile painted 10 feet high, her eyes gazing across intersections. Street artists scrawled her name in alleyways. She was no longer just a daughter lost. She was a ghost that haunted everyone. And yet the questions sharpened. Why had it taken 24 years to find her? Why had evidence been buried? Why had another suspect slipped away? Was the man in prison guilty or convenient? Each question tore deeper, the city's trust eroding further. Inside the courthouse, appeals loomed. Defense attorneys filed motions, arguing the trial was flawed, the evidence circumstantial, the conviction unsafe. Legal analysts debated furiously. Some said DNA was enough. Others said time had rotted the case, turned justice into theater. Appeals courts prepared for battle, Phoenix bracing for another storm. The family begged for it to end, begged for silence, begged for their daughter to rest. But silence was impossible. The case was no longer theirs. It belonged to the city, to the nation, to the world. And the desert stayed quiet, as it always had, holding secrets in its endless miles of dust. The cold case was solved on paper, but in Phoenix it still breathed, restless, unsatisfied. A shadow cast over every street where the sun burned and the night lingered too long. The appeal tore open the wound again. Lawyers filed thick motions, pages dripping with accusation. Contaminated evidence, lost files, mishandled witnesses, the forgotten suspect with the other white pickup. They argued the trial had been theater, not justice. The courthouse, still echoing from the guilty verdict, braced for another storm. Phoenix lit up with the news. Headlines screamed convicted man fights back. Talk shows split down the middle, half demanding his sentence remain, half insisting the wrong man had been caged. Families across Arizona tuned in, their eyes fixed on screens, their voices raw with debate. The city had become jury again, restless, divided, furious. In court, defense attorneys attacked relentlessly. They said the cigarette butt, the DNA, the so-called proof, could not be trusted after 24 years in a box. They held up chain of custody logs, pointing to signatures faded, transfers poorly documented, boxes stored in rooms with questionable security. They asked, how can evidence survive decades untouched? How can certainty exist when the past itself is corrupted? The prosecution countered with science, voices sharp, words precise. DNA markers do not fade, they said. 99.9% probability does not vanish. They waved statistics like weapons, insisting the numbers were stronger than doubt. They reminded judges of the necklace, the photographs, the timeline of his sudden departure from Phoenix in 1996. They painted him again as a man who thought the desert would protect him, who believed time would erase guilt. The family sat through it once more, their grief dragged into public view again. The mother's face had aged 2 decades in silence, yet her eyes still carried the fire of loss. She whispered to reporters, "We cannot do this forever. We need it to end." But the case refused to end. Outside, Phoenix boiled. Crowds filled streets, signs raised high. Justice, not doubt. Free the innocent, truth or nothing. Protests clashed, fists flew, sirens wailed, police formed barricades, shields gleaming in desert sun. The courthouse steps became battlegrounds of grief and rage. The media stoked the flames. New documentaries aired, each with their own spin. One painted the man as a monster, the girl as his victim, the desert as his accomplice. Another painted him as scapegoat, the real killer long dead, the system desperate for closure. Viewers devoured both, trapped between horror and suspicion. Podcasts dissected transcripts line by line, fueling paranoia. Truth became entertainment, and the girl's face, frozen at 17, sold more headlines than any politician. And then, in the middle of hearings, a shocking twist surfaced. A retired detective stepped forward, carrying notes never entered into evidence. In his files was a report from 1995, a call log just hours after the girl vanished. A witness claimed to have seen her in the passenger seat of a dark sedan, not a pickup, being driven west toward the highway. The report was marked unverified and filed away. For decades, no one had mentioned it. The revelation hit the courtroom like a bomb. The defense seized it instantly. Another car, another sighting, another suspect. Proof, they shouted, that the investigation was flawed from the start. Proof the wrong man was on trial. The prosecution scrambled, arguing the report was unreliable, uncorroborated, a ghost from the past with no weight. But the doubt spread, poisonous, unshakable. Phoenix reeled. Was she in a pickup or a sedan? Was she taken by one man or another? The city no longer knew what to believe. Whispers of networks resurfaced, of multiple predators circling Phoenix in the 90s, the missing girl just one of many. Families of other cold cases spoke louder, demanding to know why their daughters had been ignored. The case had become larger than itself, a storm swallowing everything. In prison, the convicted man remained silent. Guards said he smirked when news of the forgotten report reached him, a tiny curl of the lips that unsettled even hardened officers. Rumors spread that he had written a letter, smuggled out, containing one phrase, "You'll never find her." The tabloids devoured it, headlines screaming, "Killer mocks city from behind bars." Whether the letter was real or fabricated didn't matter, the damage was done. Appeal hearings dragged for months, every session packed, every word broadcast. Judges pressed lawyers, pressed witnesses, pressed experts. Was the evidence reliable? Was the verdict safe? The city waited for answers like a body waiting for heartbeat. Meanwhile, new searches began. Police scoured dry riverbeds, dug into desert lots, probed abandoned wells. Nothing surfaced. The desert stayed silent, holding its secrets tight. At last, the appeals panel issued its decision. The conviction would stand. The evidence, though imperfect, was sufficient. The man would remain in prison for life. Phoenix erupted again. Half the city roared in triumph. The other half roared in rage. Protests flared. Conspiracy theories thickened. Suspicion deepened. Justice was declared, but no one believed it. The girl's mural glared down at the chaos, her smile frozen, her eyes unblinking. The cold case was solved, the record said, but in Phoenix the case was alive, breathing, haunting, its truth still buried under layers of heat and silence. Phoenix was unraveling. The city moved through the summer heat like a fever, every shadow a suspect, every silence an accusation. The guilty verdict stood, the appeal denied, the man locked away for life, yet the case refused to die. Instead, it metastasized, spreading into every conversation, every news cycle, every restless dream. Talk radio boiled with rage. One caller shouted that the man was a monster who deserved the chair. The next caller swore he was framed, that the real killer had died years ago, that Phoenix was celebrating a lie. Podcasts fed the hysteria, spinning theories late into the night. Trafficking rings moving through I-10, police corruption burying suspects, networks of predators hiding behind respectable faces. Downloads spiked, advertisers cashed in. Truth was no longer the prize, drama was. On the courthouse steps, protests never ended. Day after day, candles flickered, fists rose, banners shouted justice for her and free the innocent. Clashes erupted nightly, police holding lines as bottles shattered, sirens screamed, helicopters hovered. Phoenix, city of sun and sprawl, looked more like a war zone. And then the vigilantes came. Groups of men in masks, claiming to protect the community, prowled streets in pickup trucks, looking for predators. They cornered strangers, harassed men with records, shouted accusations at neighbors. One night they stormed the home of a former suspect long cleared by police, dragging him into the street, cameras recording, his face bloody before officers intervened. The footage spread online, millions watching Phoenix hunt its own. The girl's case had birthed hysteria, and hysteria had birthed violence. Inside prison walls, the convicted man became myth. Guards said he moved like a shadow, never speaking, never breaking. Inmates whispered he carried drawings under his mattress, sketches of desert washes, dirt roads, headlights cutting across empty land. Smuggled stories leaked to tabloids, each more dramatic than the last. Some claimed he confessed at night, whispering to no one. Others swore he laughed, repeating the same phrase, "She belongs to the desert." Whether true or not, the city believed it. The silence became a monster, and the monster had his face. Meanwhile, journalists kept digging. A reporter unearthed a 1995 shipping manifest showing a container leaving Phoenix docks days after she vanished. The paperwork was thin, the contents vague. Speculation erupted. Was she taken out of Arizona entirely, hidden in steel, lost in transit? The report was inconclusive, but headlines screamed anyway. Trafficking link? Theories multiplied. If she had been smuggled, then the man in prison was not a lone predator. He was either part of something larger or not part of it at all. The family sat in silence through the madness. Their grief had been stretched too far. Their daughter transformed into a symbol they no longer recognized. The mother whispered to cameras, "Stop making her a headline. She was my child." But the city didn't listen. Phoenix had turned her memory into a canvas, onto which it painted its rage, its paranoia, its guilt. The task force, still clinging to relevance, reopened boxes, desperate to prove finality. They retested soil samples, combed through fibers, re-interviewed aging witnesses. They found nothing new. The desert had erased everything. Every grain of sand was silence. Yet silence did not stop the frenzy. One night, a letter arrived at a newsroom, handwritten, shaky, unsigned. It claimed her body was not buried where police had found bones, but miles away, sealed in an old drainage pipe. Search teams stormed the location at dawn, cameras following, the city watching live. Crews pried open rusted steel, dragged out debris, mud, trash, no body, nothing. Another ghost lead, another cruel hoax. But the hoax didn't kill the obsession. It fed it. Every false lead confirmed for Phoenix that the truth was still hidden. Every failure sharpened the hunger. The girl's mural downtown became a shrine, covered in candles, flowers, graffiti demanding answers. People wept before her frozen smile, strangers who had never met her, yet felt owned by her story. The conviction said the case was solved. The streets said otherwise. The city believed in accomplices, in cover-ups, in ghosts still walking free. The girl had vanished in 1995, but in 2020's Phoenix, she was more alive than ever, alive in fear, in fury, in fire. And as the desert sun fell, casting long shadows across highways, the cold case breathed on, restless, unsatisfied, its truth still buried somewhere beneath dust and silence. Phoenix had become a city of ghosts. Every headline screamed betrayal, every conversation circled back to the girl, every shadow felt like an echo of 1995. The conviction was official, the sentence locked, yet no one trusted it. On paper, the case was solved. On the streets, it was alive, clawing through the city like wildfire. Theories metastasized. Talk radio thundered with callers insisting there had been more than one man, that the convicted killer was just a pawn in a larger game. Podcasts ran with darker ideas. Trafficking networks hidden in plain sight, police shielding powerful names. The desert itself turned into a graveyard for secrets. Each voice bled into the next, creating a chorus of paranoia. Truth no longer mattered. Belief had taken its place. Journalists fueled it. Investigations poured ink across front pages, reporters tracking down old cops, old files, old witnesses. A retired officer admitted under anonymity that evidence had gone missing in 1995, not lost, but deliberately removed. Boxes unaccounted for, logs altered. He said whispers circulated back then of orders from above. No names, no proof, just whispers, but whispers were enough. Headlines screamed, cover-up suspected, the city convulsed. Crowds flooded downtown, angrier than before. Banners no longer just carried her face. They carried accusations. Who are you protecting? Justice for all the missing. Mothers of other vanished girls marched at the front, their photographs raised high, demanding their daughters not be forgotten in the storm. Police braced for riots. By nightfall, Phoenix was on fire again, smoke curling into desert air, sirens cutting the dark. And then came the footage. A local TV station aired newly unearthed security video from a gas station near the interstate, time-stamped the night she disappeared. Grainy, distorted, but there. A vehicle pulling into frame, headlights glaring, a figure in the passenger seat, head bowed. Analysts slowed the footage, sharpened frames, pointed at shadows. Some swore it was her. Others said impossible to confirm. But one detail shook the city. The car wasn't a pickup, it was a sedan, the same type mentioned in the Forgotten Witness report uncovered during the appeal. The broadcast detonated. If true, then the trial had been built on sand. If she had been in a sedan, not a truck, then who was behind the wheel? Was the convicted man guilty at all, or was Phoenix clinging to the wrong face while the real killer slipped away? Social media ignited, conspiracy hashtags trended, the city's faith collapsed entirely. Inside prison walls, the man at the center of it all remained silent. Guard said he watched the footage on the news and smiled for the first time in years. Just a curl of the lips, quick, unsettling. The tabloid seized it, plastering his face across front pages. The killer smiles at chaos. Whether it was real or imagined didn't matter. Phoenix believed it. His silence was a mirror, reflecting everyone's fear. The task force scrambled, reopening archives again, comparing the sedan footage to witness statements. They tracked down the retired detective who'd logged the call in 1995. His voice shook as he admitted the sighting was never followed, resources stretched thin, priorities elsewhere. He called it regret. The city called it negligence. The family called it betrayal. The girl's mother, her voice breaking, stood before cameras once more. How many times will we have to hear this? How many times will you reopen her wounds? All I wanted was to bring her home. Her words cracked the nation, yet the frenzy continued. Her daughter's memory was no longer theirs. It belonged to Phoenix, to America, to the world, devoured by an obsession that would not rest. More tips flooded in. Anonymous calls claimed her body lay in canals, in abandoned houses, in desert pits. Each lead investigated, each one empty. Construction crews uncovered bones outside the city, headlines screaming remains found, only for tests to confirm they belonged to someone else. Phoenix was littered with ghosts, each discovery another knife in the wound. Meanwhile, suspicions shifted higher. Investigative reporters dug into political ties from the 90s, names connected to shipping firms, companies moving containers out of Phoenix just as the girl vanished. Some executives still alive, some long dead, all cloaked in wealth and secrecy. Were they linked to her disappearance? Or was the city twisting shadows into monsters? The question roared louder than answers. Protests turned into nightly rituals. Crowds lit candles, then hurled rocks. Banners turned into barricades. Police fired tear gas. Sirens screamed. The desert sky filled with smoke. Phoenix was tearing itself apart, one cold case dragging an entire city into madness. And through it all, the girl's mural downtown glowed in candlelight, Her eyes painted wide, her smile frozen, her face transformed into a symbol of grief, rage, and endless questions. Children who weren't alive in 1995 now whispered her name in playgrounds, warned never to walk alone, never to trust strangers. She had become a myth, a warning, a ghost haunting generations. The conviction stood, the sentence held, but the city no longer believed. The cold case was alive again, darker, hungrier, its truth still buried in the dust of 1995, unreachable, untouchable, a secret that refused to die. Phoenix was collapsing under the weight of its own obsession. The girl's disappearance was no longer just a case, it was a fault line splitting the city open. The conviction said one story, the streets screamed another, and the space between those two versions of truth became chaos. Talk shows shouted through the night. Former detectives, self-styled experts, conspiracy theorists, all jostling for airtime. One claimed the police had buried evidence to protect someone powerful. Another swore the convicted man was guilty but not alone, that a ring of predators had haunted Phoenix for years. Theories spilled faster than facts, and the city drank them like water in the desert. Protests escalated. What began as candles and banners turned into barricades and fire. Crowds stormed intersections, chanting her name, blocking highways, holding up signs. Who are you protecting? Justice is a lie. Police in riot gear clashed with citizens, tear gas rolling through the heat, rubber bullets snapping. Helicopters circled overhead, spotlights cutting across sprawl. Downtown looked like a war zone, all sparked by a case 24 years old that refused to stay buried. And in the shadows, vigilantes sharpened their fury. Men in masks patrolled neighborhoods, breaking into houses of men with records, live-streaming confrontations, accusing them of being part of the conspiracy. A local teacher with a decades-old arrest for assault was dragged into the street, beaten, left bleeding while cameras rolled. The video went viral. Phoenix had turned hunting into entertainment. Fear spread faster than fire. The family of the girl recoiled from the frenzy. Their daughter's face, once just theirs, was now a weapon wielded by strangers. Her mural downtown had become a rallying point, covered in graffiti, candles, fists raised in anger. The mother whispered to reporters, "She was human. She laughed, she cried, she loved. She is not your conspiracy." But the city no longer heard her. They had turned her into something else, something larger than life. Inside prison walls, the convicted man sat silent, but his silence only grew louder. Guards whispered he scribbled symbols on paper scraps, maps of the desert, cryptic notes smuggled to no one. One rumor claimed he laughed when the protests turned violent, that he whispered to himself, "The city burns for her. The city burns for me." Whether truth or invention, tabloids devoured it. His silence became fuel, his face the mask of Phoenix's paranoia. And then another revelation detonated. Journalists uncovered internal memos from 1996 showing that not all evidence from the original investigation had been logged. Photographs existed of tire tracks near the burial site, different from the convicted man's pickup. The memo suggested another vehicle had been there, another presence, another hand in her death. Why had it been ignored? Why had it never surfaced at trial? The leak sent shockwaves through the city. If another vehicle was there, then who drove it? And why had the state chosen to bury that detail? Theories metastasized overnight. Was it the other suspect long dead? Was it someone powerful, protected, untouchable? Was Phoenix convicting one man while shielding another? Protesters roared louder. Conspiracy boards lit up. The sense of betrayal deepened, cutting through every conversation. The task force scrambled, forced to confirm the leak was real. The memo existed, the photos existed, but the trail was cold, useless now, just another ghost from the desert. That admission only enraged the city more. By now, Phoenix no longer trusted its own police. Neighborhood groups formed, promising their own investigations. Online forums spread maps, theories, wild accusations. Names of ordinary men were published, their photos shared, their addresses leaked. Innocent families fled the city, fear poisoned the air. The case was no longer about one girl. It had become about every failure, every secret, every crack in the system. It was about trust shattered and never rebuilt. Phoenix felt cursed, trapped in a nightmare where the truth could never be known, where justice was always a mirage on the horizon. And then came the darkest night. A group of vigilantes broke into a warehouse near the industrial district, convinced it held evidence, convinced the real killers had hidden trophies there. They streamed it live, thousands watching. Inside, they found only dust and rusted tools. But by the time police arrived, one man was dead, beaten by the mob for knowing too much. His name hit headlines. His face splashed across screens, only for investigators to confirm hours later he had no connection to the case at all. Phoenix gasped, horrified, yet unable to stop watching. The girl's ghost had consumed everything. Justice, truth, reason. Her name echoed through streets, through airwaves, through nightmares. She was no longer just a teenager lost in the summer of 1995. She was a symbol of a city tearing itself apart. The conviction still stood, the man still sat in prison. But Phoenix had ceased to believe in verdicts and courts in order. All it believed in was the haunting, the endless question mark hanging above every desert road, every culvert, every shadow. The cold case was solved on paper. In reality, it was a wound that refused to close, bleeding endlessly into the streets of Phoenix. The nights stretched longer than the daylight now, not because the sun had changed, but because Phoenix refused to close its eyes. Helicopters thudded over rooftops, cameras perched like vultures on courthouse ledges. Talk radio ran until dawn, callers confessing fears to strangers because no one trusted silence anymore. The city's pulse was a siren. Rise, fall, rise again, drawing people to the same questions, the same corners, the same mural where her eyes watched everything and forgave nothing. The conviction stood. The appeal had failed. And yet the city moved as if a verdict were a rumor that could be outrun if you ran hard enough down Van Buren with your fists in the air and your throat raw from chanting. The governor announced a blue ribbon commission at noon, cameras flashing, the seal behind her shimmering in the heat. Independent review. Subpoena power. No sacred cows. She promised the state would empty every archive, shake every dusty box, call every retired cop out of the golf course and back into the soundproof rooms. She promised light. Phoenix wanted fire. The press conference ended and the crowd pressed forward shouting dates, names, girls who'd vanished before and after 1995. The podium trembled. A microphone fell. The governor's face flickered on screens across gas stations and living rooms, but the sound people heard wasn't her voice. It was the chorus from outside. Who are you protecting? Who are you protecting? Who are you protecting? Inside prison, the man who'd become the city's lightning rod stared at a wall cooled by shade. The rumor mill kept spinning. He'd carved a new message into the paint. He'd told a chaplain he'd speak soon. He'd traded an old shirt for a pencil and wrote a map no one could find. Guards denied everything, then whispered in the break room that something about his stillness felt like a plan. He ate, he slept, he waited while Phoenix tore itself into pieces, deciding what his silence meant. The commission subpoenaed boxes from the basement of a precinct built long before 1995, mold, tape, misfiled statements, unlabeled rolls of film rattling in Ziplocs. They threaded the film through old machines, brought the past to life in a jittery gray. Parking lots with long shadows. Gas station clerks with cigarettes tucked behind ears. A clock blinking the wrong time in neon. In one clip, a sedan at the edge of frame, blur, pause, pixelation made of heat. Analysts circled shapes on printouts in red pencil, leaned over light tables until their eyes watered. It could be anything. It could be everything. That night the wind shifted and rolled dust down from the desert, a brown wall swallowing the skyline, a haboob that erased street signs and turned headlights into dull planets inches from bumpers. People pulled over on the shoulder and sat with hazard lights ticking like metronomes while the storm pushed the city into a cocoon of grit and breath. In that dimness, phones glowed. Another leak. The memo with the tire tracks, a name redacted, the shape of a license plate mentioned and then scratched out with a line that looked angry even in photocopy. The story said a superior had ordered the report closed. The story said the tires didn't match the convicted man's truck. The story said compromised. The storm shook windows and the city shook with it. By morning, dust lay on everything. Porches, palms, the shoulders of people in line outside the courthouse. A teenage girl pressed her ear to her mother's ribcage and said she could hear the city's heart there. Reporters were already live, their hair coated in the same powder that covered the mural downtown, turning the painted cheeks ash gray. A street preacher shouted through a battery amp about sins and deserts and God hiding truth to test faith. A former detective walked past him with a folder under his arm and a gaze fixed on some point in the air where time had cracked. The commission called him in. He sat under fluorescent lights that hummed like a headache and explained the year 1995 as if it were a storm no one remembered correctly. The call about the sedan, the tire photos no one logged, the witness who moved away, frightened of her own shadow. He used words that broke as they left his mouth: triage, backlog, tunnel vision. The room smelled faintly of toner and fear. Commissioners took notes with pens that clicked too loud. When he finished, there was no applause, no outrage, only the noise of air conditioning and a chair scraping cement. Outside the window, heat blurred the parking lot until it looked like water that would never quench anything. At dusk, candles lit the curb at Camelback and 19th, flickers in the wind where she was last seen with milk and bread bag handles biting into fingers. People took turns at the curb as if it were an altar. A man who stocked shelves in 1995 said he carried boxes past her that night and remembered nothing unusual except the heat. He cried anyway. A woman who'd been 17 then and was 47 now said she kept her car keys between her knuckles for years after. A child asked why everyone whispered the words cold case like a spell. Her mother said, because it hurts in the mouth if you say it loud. The following week, the commission cracked open a banker's box from the county lab marked MISC. Inside, twin envelopes and a cassette wrapped in a Post-it. The tape had warped, the spools gummy. Someone found an old player in a janitor's closet, plugged it in, pressed play with a pencil so the button would stay down. Static, the drone of an air vent. A voice, far away, as if speech were coming from another room in another decade. She's in the culvert west of 83rd, you're too late. The timestamp placed the call 3 days after the girl vanished. The recording ended with a click like a door closing. No one moved for a moment, then everyone did. Cruisers tore across the grid like beads of mercury, sirens tuning the afternoon into a single long note that wove through date palms and under power lines. A culvert west of 83rd, the concrete throat under a road. Men in boots lowered ladders, headlamps carving tunnels out of dark. Camera vans leaned on shoulders of asphalt like vultures again. A helicopter settled above and blew palm fronds flat. They found nothing. Not a scrap of cloth, not a hair, not a bone, not a cigarette that could be argued into meaning. The concrete smelled like mineral water and old heat. Someone wrote "too late" in chalk on the edge of the road before rain from a sprinkler line bled the words into gray. That night, Phoenix turned its fear on its own reflection again. Comment sections burned, theories flowered and died. A woman posted a 7-minute video connecting street names to Bible verses to exit numbers and swore the case was a ritual. A man in a polo shirt blamed every elected official since 1994. A teenager stitched a dozen clips into a timeline that made sense for 20 seconds and then fell apart. The mural grew another layer of wax and soot. The commission's next hearing was standing room only. A lab director spoke about partials, degradation, stochastic effects. The room folded those syllables into a single feeling, slippery. A tech said the cigarette butt's DNA profile met thresholds then and still met them now. A defense expert smiled without humor and asked who set thresholds and why. The word confidence lost its meaning from overuse. A juror from the trial sat in the back row and wept quietly into a sleeve, not because she doubted what she'd done, but because she understood that belief and proof were different animals, and the city fed on both. In the prison yard, the man walked circles like a compass that couldn't find north. A chaplain told a reporter off record that the man had asked what the desert looked like in moonlight. A guard countered that he'd asked nothing at all, not even for salt at dinner. The warden said he'd granted no interviews, would grant none, and then turned his badge face down on his desk and stared at the carpet for a long time. The commission subpoenaed a name. The redaction peeled back in private session to reveal a city official from another era, now retired to a cul-de-sac 2 hours north, where blue recycling bins waited like sentries on the curb. He arrived in a linen shirt and a gaze that tried hard to be empty. "Did you close the tire track memo, yes or no?" He said he'd defer to counsel. The room tasted like metal. The chair of the commission put both hands flat on the table and reminded him that the desert keeps everything, even sins, even signatures. He repeated that phrase about counsel, eyes on the ceiling tiles. A monsoon built on the horizon, anvil cloud and purple silk stacked to the lip of space. The city inhaled electricity. Lightning flicked the rim of the world and then came closer, closer, until the mural's varnish shivered with the thunder. Rain fell like a verdict, hard and sudden, turning alleys into shining spines and washing ash from the curb. People ran from the courthouse awning, laughing without humor, shirts plastered to skin, hair sluiced into ropes. The mural's colors deepened. Her eyes looked newly wet. Someone said it was a sign. Someone said it was weather. The Channel 2 anchor said it was both. The rain lifted heat off asphalt and left steam that looked like ghosts climbing out of the ground. The city smelled new for an hour. Then the dust returned, the same way questions did. The commission scheduled more hearings. The governor promised more power. The family drew their curtains and answered the door for no one. The vigil moved from night to night like a traveling wound. Camelback to 83rd, to the culvert, to the overpass where truckers lay on their horns for a beat that sounded like grief. At 2 in the morning, a dispatcher took a call from a payphone that should have been dead. The voice said the word wrong twice. "You're digging in the wrong places. You keep digging in the wrong places. She's where the water talks." The payphone's camera had been ripped out years ago. Patrol units traced a wet sneaker print to the edge of a lot and lost it to gravel. The map on the incident report glowed on a detective's laptop until the battery bled out. He closed the lid, rubbed his eyes, and listened to the air conditioner pretend it was rain. By sunrise, Phoenix had rewritten the message into 100 prophecies. Water talks in canals, in treatment plants, in hotel fountains where wedding parties toss coins, in the Salt River when it remembers its name. The city became cartographers again, drawing circles on maps, arguing prepositions, west of, south of, under, where. A podcaster said the phrase matched a line in an old song about canals. A grandmother said it matched her memory of sprinklers slapping chain link on a block where the white pickup had been seen. A man who hadn't slept 3 nights said water talks loudest when it drowns you. By noon, trucks with the state seal rolled toward gates where locks had already been cut by men in T-shirts in righteous fury. The commission's badges said authorized. The men at the fence said we don't need authorization. Camera drones rose like dragonflies. Heat came down in sheets. A deputy set his palm on the hood of his cruiser and hissed when his skin protested. Someone shouted from the canal bank that they saw something in the reeds. Someone else shouted it was a tire. The camera zoomed until the pixels broke apart and rebuilt into a shape that could be anything. The city held its breath. You could feel it on your gums, that pause. The same pause from 1995 under brighter lights and slower sirens. Then a child on a bicycle rode across the live shot behind the anchor and rang a bell that sounded like a laugh from another life. And the spell broke, and the crowd returned to shouting. In the state's divers clipped knives to their thighs and slipped into water that carried more rumors than silt. They found scrap metal, a shopping cart, a rusted wheel from a wagon no one remembered pulling. No dress, no bone, no proof. The divers surfaced slick with algae and something like shame. A commissioner pinched the bridge of his nose. A protester threw a bottle into the canal to make a point and missed. The bottle bobbed away like an answer leaving the scene. The sun slid down the western rim and turned every window into a blowtorch. The mural took on embers in her hair. Neighborhood dogs barked without cause. The helicopter's fuel light blinked and it had to peel off and refuel while another thumped in to cover the absence. The anchor said breaking so often the word cracked. The city kept waiting for a thing that would not come, listening for water to talk, listening for the desert to finally confess. When the moon rose, it was the color of a bruise. People pointed phones at it and tried to make meaning out of a rock and light and air. The commission announced more subpoenas at 9. The governor promised nothing would be spared at 10. The family said nothing at 11. The prisoner turned his face to the cinder block and closed his eyes at midnight as if he could hear applause from someplace far away. Phoenix did not sleep. Neither did the question. In the spaces between sirens, the city rehearsed the next day's chant and the one after that, held together by a photograph from a summer when asphalt melted into waves and a girl with a bag of milk and bread stepped into evening as if it would carry her home. The city practiced the names of canals and culverts like prayers, and somewhere under all that noise, something small and merciless kept time. The tick of a case file closing and reopening and closing again. The metronome of a heart that belongs to a city that has forgotten how to stop. The sun came back hard, as if the night had never happened, as if thunder and searchlights had been a dream the city needed to outgrow by morning, but Phoenix wore the fatigue on its skin, a film of dust and doubt no water could rinse clean, and the chant that had rattled the courthouse steps the day before had thinned to a rasp in the throats of people who had run out of rage and hadn't found peace to replace it. And still the story moved forward because stories don't ask permission. They just wake up and keep going. The commission met again beneath humming lights and hollow ceilings, boxes open, paper curled at the edges like leaves scorched by too many summers, and a clerk with a voice like sand read another memo that had slept for years. An anonymous tip logged the week after she vanished. A note scrawled, 2 words underlined twice, water talks, and a map sketched with a finger blackened by copier toner, nothing precise, just a gesture at the miles of canal veins that webbed the city like a second nervous system. A commissioner asked if anyone had followed it. The room held its breath while a page turned. The answer landed with the weight of a glass set down too hard. No. The word echoed, no. The chair nodded as if grief could be absorbed through posture, as if a city could be steadied by the way shoulders square. News traveled like heat, invisible until it hurt. Talk radio turned the 2 words into a sermon. Podcasters stitched them over footage of concrete channels and sluggish brown currents that sounded like static if you closed your eyes. The mural collected another 100 candles. The family kept their door closed and their lights low, and sat with a photograph that had become heavier with every broadcast. The mother traced the line of her daughter's jaw and remembered the way she always tilted her head when she asked a question, the exact angle that used to make laughter spill out of kitchens, the angle that lived now in paint and print and air. She whispered, not to cameras, not to crowds, but to a space that smelled like coffee and dust and the breath of a home. I am still here. Come back from wherever they put you. The house answered by settling a little deeper on its foundation. Inside prison walls, the man walked his circle until the gravel wore itself into a groove, and when he paused at the fence, he watched dust spin in miniature tornadoes at his feet and let his eyes go soft until chain link blurred into the vibration of heat. A chaplain asked if he knew the words that were setting Phoenix's mouth on fire. He shook his head once, a movement that might have been denial or exhaustion or the dismissal of a trick. The chaplain said nothing is ever just a trick in a city that won't stop praying. The man turned away and traced a line along the cinder block with his finger until the skin thinned and the line bled, tiny and stubborn, a quiet red that no camera could magnify into a confession. Silence broadened its shoulders and sat beside him like a friend. The commission released a schedule, testimony from a former technician who claimed an unlogged photograph existed, testimony from a dispatcher who remembered the payphone and the click and nothing else, testimony from a woman who had been a girl in 1995 and had seen a white pickup and then a sedan, and then her own fear reflected in the glass of a bus stop as the night turned into a siren. The technician's hands trembled around a paper cup, and he said yes, there was a photograph of a footprint in damp canal silt, and yes, he'd filed it, and no, he couldn't say where it went when the lab moved rooms and everyone traded keys and no one traded responsibility. The dispatcher brought a small notebook and the numbers she had copied in case the system ate them, and she read them into a microphone as if reading a psalm, one digit at a time, until the room felt brave enough to breathe. The woman stared past the commissioners to a corner where the light did something familiar and said the memory changed shape whenever she held it, and the shape she trusted least was the one that made sense. Phoenix went quiet in small pockets the way a fire sometimes lowers its voice before it finds new oxygen. And in those pockets, people returned to chores and haircuts and the algebra of rent while the rest of the city held vigil against an idea that would not sit still. At a canal, just north of Indian School, a boy tossed a rock and listened for the sound he'd been told water makes when it talks. And because he was young, he decided the plop counted, and because he was kind, he decided it meant she deserved rest. An old man in a folding chair on a porch wrote a letter to no one and folded it twice and put it in his shirt pocket and stared at the street while shadows moved like water across stucco. The commission's next revelation arrived as a lack, no fingerprints on the necklace in a quality anyone would swear to, no usable prints in the culvert they had chased at 3 a.m, no faces in the grain of the gas station video that would pass the courtroom test, only the suggestion of elbows and a head that might have been bowed and might have been bent against a glare that was only a reflection off someone else's windshield. The chair cleared her throat and said the phrase that always sat next to tragedy like a second chair at a table. We did not find what we were looking for. A reporter wrote it down and crossed it out and wrote it again and underlined find until the ink sank through the page. Protesters came back, fewer now, voices smoke rough and eyes rimmed red, and they stood beneath a sky the color of sunburn, and asked why a city could widen its freeways in perfect lanes and not locate a truth that had lived for decades inside 30 square miles of dust. A mother of another missing girl held up a photograph that had almost no pixels left because time eats light, and when she lowered it, she did not lower her chin. A man in a suit promised accountability into a microphone that squealed, and the sound turned the promise into a note that meant nothing, a high, thin sound that made people step back from their own hope as if hope were a stray spark. The mural watched and did not blink. The family went to the riverbed where the river remembers and forgets by season and by dam. And they walked until the dirt turned to a pale powder that held their footsteps for 3 seconds and then let them go. And the father picked up a stone smooth as a secret and pressed it into his palm and thought of the weight of a carton of milk and a loaf of bread and the sound of a key in a door that never turned because nothing came home. He knelt without meaning to and said her name in a voice that usually only answered phones and told repairmen what part had broken. The name held its shape in the air for a long time and then dissolved like breath on a mirror. The governor gave the commission more time. The commission took it like a person takes a glass of water after crossing a parking lot in July. Grateful, not fooled. A new envelope surfaced with an old date and a staple rusted to orange. Inside, a bus route printout marked in blue pen, a circle where a stop used to be, a note that read simply, Talker. A detective who had not been born in 1995 traced the path by finger on a wall map and felt a line run through the space between 2 knuckles, and in that tiny ache imagined a city knitting itself around a hole and pretending the seam was smooth. He walked the route anyway, counted the steps between shade and no shade, and stood where the circle fell and listened to traffic until the sound became water, until everything becomes water if you stand still enough in the heat. At the prison, rumor finally broke itself against fact when a guard filed a report that said the man had spoken 2 words in the lunch line after a tray bumped his own and a plastic cup tipped and water made a dark coin on the concrete. Wrong place. The report made it